Hello and welcome everybody to the NFDI Talks. I'm Elena and I'm working in the NFDI Association's head office. In our NFDI Talks, every 2 weeks, scientists from different disciplines present exciting topics around research data infrastructure and management. All talks are live streamed and saved on our YouTube channel. Exclusively here in Zoom, we invite you to discuss the topics and ask your questions after the talk. So in this episode, we will touch the core of an infrastructure, basic services. Within NFDI, Base4NFDI supports the selection and development of basic services, where a service must go through 3 different phases to become an NFDI basic service. The initialization phase, the integration and ramp-up phase. In following talks, we will get to know different basic services of the 3 phases. And to kick this off today, we will first be introduced to Base4NFDI itself by Xenia Ritter, the technical expert from Base4NFDI. After that, we will get insights into one specific basic service that's currently in the first phase. Terminology services for NFDI. From Roman Baum, a co-principal investigator of terminology services for NFDI. Roman has also a background in computational science and is located at ZB Med in the Knowledge Management Department, where he focused on terminology services like OLS onto Portal in the past years. So now, welcome Xenia and Roman.
Thank you. I will maybe start with sharing my screen. And yeah, thank you very much. I want to use the first 5 minutes to introduce us all a bit to Base4NFDI. I work with Base4NFDI as technical referentin, as Elena mentioned, and yeah, want to explain a bit how we see basic services as the key components. One of the key components for fair research data management. And I want to start with saying that Base4NFDI is the joint initiative of all 26 consortia you see here on the right side. And this is important because when all disciplines come together, they can give input, bring in their expertise, and find common solutions, common ground, common standards, because our goal is to establish reliable basic services for fair research data management. And how do we do that, and how do we get there, is by creating basic services that will be easily usable for as many consortia and communities as possible. They have to be interoperable with international standards and services and policies like the EASC, and they utilize synergies between existing solutions, so they don't need to come up with something completely new necessarily. And Base4NFDI provides the framework to do all this. So we can define potential topics for basic services. We conduct user-driven requirement analyses, for example, on user experience or software. And we, as Elena mentioned, we accompany those services in the development in 3 different stages. So initialization, integration, ramping up, and we do this stepwise. And until they be deployed or will be deployed in the NFDI-wide basic service portfolio. We also provide means for monitoring, evaluation, training materials, and we want to allocate the flexible funding in a transparent manner. That's our premise. And lastly, we have a consensus building, and those 2 words are actually like very small, but have a big and ambitious meaning in NFDI. So we want to work towards one NFDI, and this is our goal. However, I should also note that Base4NFDI does not provide operational basic services at this time, but we provide the means to. And coming to the definition again of what is a basic service, and this is a technical organizational solution that typically includes storage and computing services, software processes and workflows, support for service desks, so help desks, staff. And this sounds rather technical right now, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. So different levels of technicities are completely fine. But what we want is a basic service that creates value, added value for all users, and that bundles existing services, that and consider sustainable, scalable, interoperable systems. And lastly is time and usage effective with trackable KPIs. So we want to monitor them on the long run. And here come to the criteria for basic service. So we don't need to go into detail here. We see that for each phase, it changes a bit. So we add a bit more criteria to this. In the first phase, we have 25% from the agreement that comes from the consortia assembly. We need a technical readiness level of 3 to 4. We have a concept and with SWOT analysis. So that changes, but over the years for the integration, the ramping up. And the point I wanted to make here is actually that if we want to start developing a basic service, we need to take a look at sustainability at the long run and also interoperability. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, as Elena mentioned, we have 3 basic services currently under development, and I'm very excited to hear the first talk today from terminology services. But if you're interested, come and join us for persistent identifier and identity access management in February and May. And yeah, right now this was a bit short introduction, but as always, if you have any questions, send us just an email to the office and take a look at the website on base4nfdi.de. And yeah, we also have there much more information of the process itself, how you can submit a proposal and the whole process. But yeah, thank you, and handing over to you, Roman.
So first of all, I want to say thank you for the possibility to talk here today. And on the second time, I also want to say thank you to Elena and Senja for the nice introduction. And as mentioned before, I will discuss or present to you today the terminology service for NFDI. Important is the S behind terminology service, because we don't only have one. We are thinking of bringing them together, all the terminology services which are there for the NFDI. And we also want to show you how to unleash the full potential of service application by integrating such a terminology service. And for this, what I prepared for today is that we have 3 different topics. The first one is we want to have a look into which kind of terminology service exists inside of the NFDI. Afterwards, I will give you an overview what we planned in the first phase for terminology service for NFDI. And then I will also could show you some already prototyping integrations of terminology services and what happened in the first 2 months when we started with this project. So first of all, as we know, there are several NFDI consortia, and a lot of them provide terminologies in their respective domain-specific terminology service or registry. And I want to focus today on first of 2 of them. The first one is the terminology service of NFDI for chem. And the second one is the terminology service MLP of NFDI for health. Both of them are based on the ontology lookup service deployed by MLEBI. And so what is the terminology service? I have these examples. As I mentioned before, the first one is the terminology service of NFDI for chem, which provides access to a collection of ontologies relevant for the chemistry community. It also provides faceted search inside ontology, tree and list views of concept properties and individuals. It also aims to support comparison and analysis across multiple ontology for creation tasks, and it offers a unified view of issues from the original ontology repository. In addition, what they deployed at the terminology service of NFDI for chem, and which is specific to them for an OLS system, is they could also index and display scarce vocabularies. And what they also have is a comprehensive API to retrieve all the data. Next to that, we deployed at ZBMed a service which is also based on OLS, which is called SEMLOP, or long-form semantic lookup platform. And what we provide here are terminologies from another field. In this case, it's the field of medicine, nutrition, and life sciences. We also have the access to these terminologies. There's a possibility to use an API, but we also use this API to create React-based widgets, which is more or less, you could think of an microservice, but this microservice is combined in a graphical user interface. So you have small snippets you could integrate like Lego bricks on your web page, and to get the data from such a terminology service. And as I mentioned, such a widget uses an API and combines the data received with specific HTML components. And in addition, what is possible with this approach is that you could integrate these widgets directly into other applications. And I will show you some examples in the future talk today. But I mentioned also there's another terminology service I want to focus on. And this is the one from NFDI for biodiversity, which has a first version GF Bio terminology service, which was self-deployed in the past. But they also created a new terminology service, which is called BioDiff Portal, and this one is based on Onto Portal. And at the moment, both of the systems are online, but in the future, they only want to concentrate on the BioDiff Portal, which is based on Onto Portal. Onto Portal itself is also an ontology repository like OLS or ontology lookup service. And in this case, this terminology service provides access to the collection of ontologies relevant to the biodiversity community. It also provides a faceted search with concept, properties, and individuals. And Onto Portal can also index and display scarce vocabularies. That is not something special, like in the case of the terminology service of the TIB. It's more or less common in the Onto Portal software. And it also provides terminology recommendation and text annotation services. And there's also a map, it computes automatically mappings and offers that to upload external mappings if it's wanted to. So what we see here is that we have 3 different services. 2 of them are using the same software and another one uses another software, but we see they have something in common because all of them, they also have an API, which is possible to retrieve all the data. So they have something in common and they differ in a specific domain and also in some functionalities. And our approach is, if you're interested in all of these different terminology services which are out there, you could also have a look at BARTOC. BARTOC itself stands for the Basic Register of Thesauri, Ontology, and Classification, and is a database of knowledge organization system and cost-related registries. And what you could spot there on my subheadline is that I also added that beyond here. And the reason for that is that I could also find in BARTOC the terminology service I talked before, but you could also find some more from the NFDI there, but you could also find some terminology service which are not part of the NFDI. But what the working group terminology service did in the section NFDI, in the NFDI section from terminologies, provenance, and vocabulary, no, metadata, whatever, what the name correct is. So what we also did there is that we added or created a spreadsheet overview where all the terminology services inside of the NFDI are listed. Because BARTOC doesn't list all of them, but we have a specific view of them also here as a first result of this working group. And this table was also, the spreadsheet was also one of the things we used to provide our basic service and to create such a proposal, because we saw that there are different demands in the same, in different consortia, but we see that they have the same idea often. And that was the reason why we submitted a basic service, which is called terminology service for NFDI. And as Xenia also mentioned before, she explained what a basic service is. We still have here the old slide. This is a service, is a technical organizational solution which typically includes storage and computing services, software processes, and workflows, as well as the necessary personnel support for different service desks. And we could offer that. That was one of the reasons why we go for it. And what you now could see here on the right-hand side is the architectural overview of our system. On our left-hand side, you will see some bullet points about the system. So the system itself is called Terminology Service for NFDI. It started in November 2023. All of the developers are on board since January 1st this year. So we had to delay a little bit with some of the participants. And what we provide is a terminology service suite, which are JavaScript-based widget. So that is the same idea of the React-based widget I presented before of XAML. But here we are a little bit broader. So we are not only focusing on the language React, we also provide the widgets via JavaScript. So that means each web-based application could use these widgets afterwards. What we also have is a central API gateway where we could add some additional information, which is maybe missing in one of the different services provided by OLS, Ontoportal, or Cosmos, which are also central hosted and aligned from our side in the backend of TS4NFDI. So there's a terminology service layer where you see there's an OLS instance, an Ontoportal instance, and a Cosmos instance. And in addition, next to that, we also have we want to provide a mapping service, which will provide cross-domain mappings, and they should support SESM to show the user that a mapping is really meaningful or not. That is the idea behind SESM, that you will get some criteria how a mapping is evolved and how this is meaningful or not. But nevertheless, what you also see, what is a little bit in gray here, is that our service could handle external terminology service, which are based on the 3 different systems, OLS, Ontoportal, and Cosmos. Since the terminology service suite or this JavaScript-based widgets are only using the API of the backend services, which is OLS, Ontoportal, or Cosmos. And what you also could spot is, with my introduction, is that we already have 2 different services on board, and we have some experience with that in the past with OLS and Ontoportal. And we also have some Cosmos services listed in the spreadsheet of used terminology services inside of the NFDI. And we want to focus on this 3 at the beginning, but it would be possible in a later step that we could also integrate another service to a backend structure. So with these words, what we also are planning is we want to have an online community workshop on February 15 this year between 10 a.m. and 12. And we are in close cooperation to the NFDI section working groups, terminology service and ontology, harmonization and mappings at least. There's also a bigger connection already from other working groups, because we also get some requests from new potential basic services which are interested also in integrating our service. So our aim is that we also want to support and standardize and harmonize terminology management inside or within the NFDI. And what also was saying by Xenia before was that we also facilitating on consensus building and interoperability of services across disciplines to achieve a common knowledge representation and engineering framework. You could also spot on the bottom left the proposal. So if you're interested in more details of the what we are planning in detail, you could also have a look there. And I wanted to focus today but I wanted to today focus a little bit more on the application and integration of terminology service. And for that, I first want to introduce you to the terminology service suite, which is based on the React-based widgets of XAML. That was our starting point for that. And these widgets could be also used in JavaScript, or should be used in JavaScript-based application. And with that, I will give you a small live demonstration. First of all, that is our GitHub repository at the moment. It's still under the NFDITalks part, and it's still called XAML widgets. But the reason for that is was the original place how we created them. And now we want to transfer them afterwards also to the GitHub repository of TS4 of Base4NFDI. So what you could spot here is a typical GitHub repository. You see some documentation on the bottom. You also see there how you could integrate such widgets to your own software if you're interested in. And on the right-hand side, what you also see is some additional information. You see there are some releases, and you see a package, and you see some people who contributed there, and you see a link here. And by clicking this link, what will happen is that a software will open, which is called Storybook. And what you see there is on the left-hand side, again, a menu bar with different widgets listed there. And what you also could spot is you could open them up and you could close them and see that you have a documentation and some other serves there. So I will go back to our autocomplete widget, and what I could do here, for example, is I could search for a concept, which is in my case just diabetes. And what you see is you will get a response of different results there. With Storybook, what I also could do is I could change the controls. At the moment, as you see here, I'm querying the API of XAMLP, which is based on OLS. But I could also change that directly to OLS. And by clicking again here is what you see, you will get another response. And the other response you will get, for the reason that I only have EFO results, only EFO results in this case. And the reason for that is that I'm filtering here for ontologies, which is equal mesh and equal EFO. And mesh is not loaded inside of this terminology. So it would be already possible, as I mentioned before, to query external databases, repositories to use these widgets. I now switch back also again to this API from XAMLP. And what you see is that you also have some results for mesh there. I'm also filtering here for a type which is called class, and then I have something like a collection. And this collection is used if you want to have a subset of ontologies. In this case, we have a subset of ontologies, which is based on NFT for health. What I also could do here, and what is not possible via OLS, is I could add a language here. And I will remove everything else. And I only have as a parameter now language equals German. And when I click there again, what you see is that you will get, oh no, I also have to switch this API, because now we are searching the gateway. And the gateway gives us additional functionality like this language parameter, where I could search for a specific language. And you see that there are now German results. And I could also switch that back by just clicking, for example, V04CA. That was the example with diabetes test. And I could switch the language from German to English. And you're seeing that you will get the same results again, but this time it's English. So it's already possible to change the language and only get results in your specific language you want to have. What you also could do is that you could customize your autocomplete field. That means that you could get different results in your response. And what you also spotted there, I selected before one of the elements in the drop-down list. I will also do that now again. I will click this one. What you see is that a new line appeared, and I can open that. And what you see is that you will get a JSON response with some information here, which a service could use, for example, to do a semantic search or also to annotate data with that. In addition, what is also possible next to the autocomplete, or before we go further, I will go back to the documentation of this one. What you see here again is on the top, the same thing I entered before. So I could also enter again here diabetes in this case, because now I'm back to English. So I could also go with diabetic. But what you see is that you get a response here, and you have here the whole documentation, how you could query or how you could use this widget. And now the question is, how could you integrate that maybe to your service? And the easy solution for that is we click here on show code. You see here this HTML component, as I mentioned before. Oh, this React component in this case, you clicked on copy, you paste it to your React project, and it's working. It's more or less then working because in the first step, what you also have to do is you have to add one time a GitHub token that you could use this registry, and you also have to install the dependency of the YAML and also the peer dependencies. And after that, you could use the widgets wherever you want to. And next to the autocomplete widget, we have also other widgets, like this metadata widget. What you spot here is a general overview of a widget where you have other widgets integrated. So it would be possible to create a new widget like a Lego brick system that you will combine it in your direction like you want to have it to create your own widget afterwards. So the metadata widget is a widget combines from other widgets, Because you see on the top here, there's the breadcrumb, there's the IRI, that is the title. Here you have the description, you have here some synonyms, and I could also switch over to the hierarchy and also to the cross-references, if there are some cross-references, and I could see the data then afterwards. And again, when you want to integrate that, you click on show code or hide code, and yeah, you click on show code, click on copy, you can copy it over, and then I will zoom in a little bit. The only thing what you will do afterwards is you don't have to program anymore, you have to configure this widget, which means you have to say which API you want to query. You have to say which kind of entity type you want to have, which IRI you want to provide. It's also very easily to switch over from one, is zoom in the way? So that's small again. I will just click here. That is the same widget as we saw before. I go to the controls, and you see I have here one metadata of a specific concept, and I could just change that by changing 2984 to 2985. And in this case, we again have diabetes mellitus, but this time defined by NKIT and not by EFO, which I showed before. So it's very easily possible to switch from one place to another place to get the data afterwards. And what we also could provide in this case is something like this resource widget, which is more or less, in this case, just a table which listed the ontologies which are accessible in this case. And what I also could show you here is, I mentioned the word collection before in our old prototype, and the API gateway is still working on that. We use the word front-end instead of collection, is that we could switch between subsets of ontology, which are specific to a use case. In this case, we have this use case, which is called NFT for health, but we also implemented a second use case, which is called safety. And what you could spot now is that you have different results here because you have now EFAO, AgroVoc, and AHOL. These ontologies were not listed before when I queried or when I showed you the ontologies of NFT for health, which you're interested in. Next to that, what you could also spot on the last line is here that you maybe could download such an ontology if this one is possible. In this case, no one of the ontologies could be downloaded directly. But what I want to show you is when you now still look on this download button or this different download button, that they change to some points. And now I have the possibility that I have some additional functionality. And this functionality is again, could be defined from your side. So when you have a look inside of the documentation, and I will scroll down a little bit, then you will see that we have the different stories here. So that is the resource widget 1. And then afterwards, there will be the story which is called with actions. And that's the one we want to focus now on is here that you could change the functionality and also the look of such a widget from your side. That is then again a little bit programming, but you have the possibility to add some additional actions, which are your placeholders from your side. For example, you could use something like this table also to check specific ontologies if you want to do an annotation or something like that. Then you could go through the table, just click, select the ontologies you wanted to have, and then you could continue afterwards. That would be also something we want to use in the second phase of, so if we will go to the second phase, the integration phase, we want to use this table and this functionality, for example, that the users of our services could maintain their own collections from their side. So back to our talk. I also mentioned that before. I showed you the GitHub link already, and I also said that the repository will move to base for NFDI GitHub repository probably in the next weeks. And now I want to focus on 3 different use cases. The first one is semantic search. Then we have the data annotation services and user experience enhancement, because I want to show you how you could, I would say, upgrade or unleash the potential of such a service. So let us focus first on the semantic search. What we see here is preview. This is a preprint viewer for COVID-19 related articles, and it contains automated annotations and provides semantic concept functionality, a search functionality, and also an API to get all the data if you're interested in something like that. The access is also, again, here. If you're interested, just go there, but I will now focus on the semantic search. Because when I click on the semantic search, what you see there is the same autocomplete field as I showed you before in the storybook, because the functionality of this autocomplete field is used or directly integrated with a widget. I will then continue to another use case, which is the data annotation service or data annotation services. And one of the use cases I present here to you is the Commotion Electronic Laboratory Notebook. If you're, which is focusing on reusing concept from reaction ontology and chemical methods ontology, and they want to annotate reaction in experiments and analytical methods. I also talked to them or find out that they were at the Cordy, and I joined the biohackathon again, and they integrated the autocomplete widget of TS4NFDI to their tool, and they will give a short talk this Thursday in our working group between 2 and 3 that we will focus a little bit more on if you're interested how this is working in a different domain next to the health domain. Because what I now could show you to you is something else, that is the metadata annotation workbench, which focus on annotation of questionnaire, data dictionaries, and case report forms. And they use as an input a standardized CSV file, and they also reuse the terminologies from XAMLP again. You have there 3 choice of terminologies. I mentioned before, you could use, for example, this resources widget with the table where you could select it in the last line. And the concept information is again directly integrated from XAMLP. So there's the same functionality as I showed you before. And in general, we could say this will also increase the user experience enhancement. So once again, I talked before a preview about the semantic search, but when you hover on one of these highlighted terms here, you will also see the metadata widget again. And it is the same widget as you spotted before in the metadata annotation workbench and also in the widgets storybook. And you could do the same with the autocomplete widget and all the other widgets. And this is not just theoretical. I could also go back here to my presentation, and I could go to preview, for example, and I could just here expand all abstracts. And I could also tell you on this side that the labels you see here from the specific terms are the title widget, because maybe some of you were asking, why is this meaningful to have a title widget? For example, for a faceted search. If they are not there, you have to choose your own database to bring them over there, but you could also use a terminology service instead and just place the IRI there to get this information. I will just click on ACE2 here to show you that we have here the semantic search. And what you could also spot when I click here is that looks different like I showed you before. And the reason for that is, and I will go back to this GitHub page, is we have different releases. So what you see here is an old release, which doesn't have so much information here and not so much better user experience. So it will evolve with the time, but your old version, which you integrated to your service, is still available and still usable. So nevertheless, what you also could spot is when you click on ACE2, for example, is that you will get this metadata widget again. And here's also an example where you could see the cross-references directly integrated, where you also could use hyperlinks again to get additional information. So I just could click on this one, for example, and I will go to the PubMed article, which is related to ACE2 in this case. Next to that, I also showed you the metadata annotation workbench. And I said to you that you need a specific CSV file to use it here. So here are some prepared. As an alternative, I could also upload it here in the correct format, but we could skip this one because it's not important to present the integration of the terminology service. So we'll just go with one test data set. And what you see here is that you have terminology selection. And what you could do is, again, you could filter here, for example, and could select, like in this table I mentioned before, one of the ontologies, and this one is selected afterwards. I could also go with search again and select some other ontologies here. And the reason why I selected these three ontologies is that the test set is based on food data and nutrition data. And then I could click on annotate, and what you see is something like that, which is, I think in the first case, maybe a little bit confusing, but I'm here and I could help you. What you see on the top left is a button which is called Data Overview. You could click on that and you see a new table with different questions from this questionnaire we had. On the right-hand side, I could also show you some more rows if I'm interested. And on the left-hand side, you also see some annotations. For example, we have sex here, and when I click on sex, I will see the metadata widget again. It's the same widget as I showed you before because it's just integrated here. And I could also edit this one. So I could go and edit what is happening now, sex stand here. So that is the current variable of the questionnaire I want to annotate on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, like in this data overview, you see the current annotations. I could also say that maybe one of them is not correct. Then I could remove this one. Okay, annotation was not removed. In the other case, it's working. So let us go with this one. And when I enter here something, what you see again is that it's the same autocomplete widget as I showed you before. And when I click on one of them, you also will get the information I showed you before here again. And when I want to add this annotation afterwards, that is specific to this application, I could click on Add Annotation and I will get this information over here. Kmotion itself, I don't have the access here. If you want to see how they integrate this autocomplete widget, please join us on Thursday in the working group because they will present how this is working. But this tool is also already accessible for all of you. As I mentioned before, there's this GitHub repository for Base4NFDI also, where there's already one repository which is called TS4NFDI. There will be multiple repositories. For example, one for the gateway and one for the widgets where you could access to, and we want to change that or want to use it in the future. So let us go back to our talk and to the presentation mode, which is here. So next to the medical domain I showed you before and Kmotion, which is next Thursday, we also have two first JavaScript-based prototypes developed at the Biohackathon Germany 2023. So there's NMArchive in one case. They also, this one is not React-based. It is based on another language, but they could now use this JavaScript-based widget, and they also integrated the autocomplete one. And the other project is the Streamlit library, which is used in Python. You could also integrate it now directly via pyp.org. And you could also find the source code directly on GitHub, how they integrated this widget into such a new Streamlit library. What I also spotted and mentioned before was we were also on the Cordy, and I also spotted on the Cordy some use cases which could be interested for us, because we are interested in bringing the terminologies to the work of the researchers, data curators, and data annotators. We don't want to provide an additional terminology service you have to go to. No, we want to bring the terminology service to the application. And these are also two use cases. The colleagues of Nomad already presented their tool again in our working group in November, I think, last year. And what we did with them and all the other is that we also find out that a lot of different applications in the NFDI exist. And for that, we create a second spreadsheet with usage of terminology service. That is a spreadsheet overview, again, which is the name of the service, for example. There's a description of the service. There's also which kind of widgets or which kind of functionality, in this case, of terminology service are wished or already integrated to this different services. And it's up to you. You're totally welcome to add new services there. Just use this QR code or this short link here. I will also provide this slides afterwards via Zenodo, so it's possible just to have a look into the slides again after the talk. And when you added your data there, or even if you didn't do that, feel free to join our online community workshop on February 15, 2024, between 10 a.m. and 12. You could also see here the other co-PIs next to me, Oliver Köppler and Naro Karam, who sadly couldn't join today for other reasons, for specific reasons. And after this online community workshop, where we want to focus on you and show you these use cases again, and also to have a look in potential use cases from your side, we also want to have an on-site workshop where we work on that, because we had very good experience for the Biohackathon Germany that is meaningful, that developers from our side could directly speak to the people who want to use that on the other side, and there are probably also developers, and to integrate so that we could support you using these widgets in this case. You could contact us via this mail address and also via the NFDI Rocket Chat. And we created a new channel for that, which is hashtag TS4NFDI. And you could also just join then by clicking this one when you have a look into the Zenodo record, I would say, from my perspective. And with that, I'm done for today. So thank you for joining and listening to me.
Thank you very much, Roman, and also Xenia.